Okay, everybody, thanks for being here, obviously. And we know we've got the great position of being between you and our first break of this morning, so we'll try to keep it interesting. So I think real quick, considering the audience today, let's look at the importance of the power of data in basically structuring business success and deal success for our service provider guests today. And managing and outsourcing relationships have really effectively transformed and changed in recent years with access to data, AI, new technology, introduction of new services and new service offerings. So I'd like to talk about, from a perspective, what you guys see data, the importance of data, and how data is being used in managing the relationships and managing the deal success. And expanding upon those deals, as Kevin talked about in his keynote today, it's the world's changing. Labor arbitrage and various other components are not the same as what they've been, and data is crucial to managing it. And it's probably even more important now than it ever has been in the past. So with that, I want to go to Ruth first. Yeah. So, how do you see data impacting the ability to basically manage a client and manage the success of that client?
So kind of picking up on what Kevin was talking about earlier, the goal here is retention, right? It saves everybody time and money, eliminate cost of sales, all of those great reasons. And the only way to do that is by having good data and being able to demonstrate to your clients that you're doing the right things, the right time, the right way, for the right cost, right? And the only way to do that is through data and all kinds of data. And the other thing is, I think some of the metrics that we are tracking and have tracked over the past 30 some odd years are moving a little bit more from operational metrics to perception metrics. We're starting to see our clients ask for things like, what is the customer sat of these transactions? How do I make the transactions more effortless? So making sure that you track a level of effort score, or track customer perception, or track NPS on your transactions, help desk tickets. Those kinds of things are going to make a big difference when it comes time for the renewal and you're having conversations with your clients to make sure that you are in a position to demonstrate the strength of that relationship, and proving to your IT department that they are delivering superior service to their users is a very simple way to make sure that you're getting what you need out of that relationship and hopefully renewing as opposed to going back a bit.
Yeah, thanks. And Henry, I'd like to maybe you could expand upon that or give a perspective on not only strengthen the relationship, but expanding it through a renewal, expanding it to new scope of services to meet some of those clients' needs and requirements, how the data plays into that.
Yeah, so I've been in this advisory business for 20 some years, and gone through multiple clients, long-term clients, and we're now on Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4, outsourcing relationships. And as Kevin, talked about, we've really taken out all of the typical types of things, the cost savings through labor arbitrage and those kind of first generation type objectives. So now the data is critical to look for new ways to expand that account, look for new ways to build that relationship with the client, because that's the only way you're really going to extract more value out of it, by looking at the data, by having the data architected in the right way. And we're not talking about customer business transaction data. We're really talking about your relationship with the client, the data that you maintain and architect surrounding your relationship and your operation with the client. So architecting that the right way so that you can continually extract value is, I think, the key thing for many of these Gen 3, 4, 5 relationships.
So with that, taking that, maybe kind of doing a double click on it, how do you see some of the key challenges from a service provider's perspective on managing that? You've been in the industry for 20 years, which to me is actually a newbie. But but if you look at it, the key challenges from a service provider, what do you see some of their key challenges are?
Well, I think the interesting point is, to be honest, I haven't really seen much change in how the industry has dealt with client data and relationship data over the last 20 years. There really hasn't been much change. It's still very siloed. I think one of the panelists mentioned earlier that data today is still very siloed. It's hard to get integration across. So we see that with multi-vendor situations, multi-tower situations where the data is so siloed, not a lot of sharing going on. The client recognizes that they want integration. They want value extracted across their entire environment. So I think integration of data, access, transparency to data is still a huge problem within a relationship.
So with some of the evolution in technology and the time, the access to data, we have more data now, and now we can actually generate more analysis based on it, especially with AI now. Do you not see that? I'll throw this out to the group. Do you not see that evolving now? Have you not seen that come into play? Or you give us some of your direct experience. Sorry, but you can.
So, yeah, I mean, as Henry rightly put, that yes, the siloed business still continues to be there, and the data accuracy and the integrity because of the legacy systems. That's what we are seeing, not just from the sourcing advisory perspective, but service providers as well as from the benchmarking. When we have to curate that data and normalize it, that is when we also realize that the data is not up to the mark, or that requires more integration from that perspective. Now, that poses challenges to actually bring up a proactive recommendations from the service providers and us as advisors.
Okay.
Well, there's another layer of data here that we don't often talk about, and that's the connecting of the dots between the clients, right? So the service providers are often in a position where they're hearing goals and objectives from each of the towers or each of the client segments that they're working. And those client segments often are not talking to each other, right? And we are the ones sitting in the middle saying, hey, these guys are talking about X, Y, Z, and these guys are talking about it also, and maybe we can help broker a conversation. I mean, that kind of information creates that trusted advisor role for you all and for us.
Yeah.
And helps us, and because that's data too, right? It helps us continue to build those relationships and improve the deals because you're actually demonstrating, you're adding value for what is very little money on top of the deal, and giving yourselves the ability to be in that central position.
Yeah, I think the client expectations around what they're going to be expecting from you all is going to be huge.
Yeah, I agree with
I'm
that.
in early conversations with a couple clients, Gen 3, Gen 4, and they're expecting in their new deals to be based on a Gen AI framework, Gen AI architecture as a foundation to bring it all together, to get that end-to-end view from IT, operations, the business results, customer sat.
Right.
So yeah, they're telling us right now that we want to see this as a foundational part of your RFP. So we have to create that structure as well. But of course, as we talked earlier, we'd rather have you have those direct conversations now and avoid the RFP, but coming proactively forward with that architecture and those insights. Another one I'm hearing is they want to see across your clients.
Yeah.
So not only data within their environment, they want you to bring data from across all those clients so they could get innovative ideas from those. They can see the successes. They can build upon other successes you have to bring in new ideas into the environment.
And to the extent that you can bring them from other industries, that's huge, right? Because I know what everybody's doing in my industry. I want to know what they're doing in retail, or I want to know what they're doing in banking, or I want to know, what they're doing someplace else. Particularly for those industries that are maybe 12 to 18 months behind the technology curve, the governments, the aerospace and engineering, the heavy industries.
I agree completely, because I think too often we look at data. Data is just looked at within not only the industry vertical silo, but within the silo of that one particular client too as well. And so let's talk a little bit about the data. When I think about the data, I think about it in kind of 5 general buckets: financial, which is cost, budgeting, forecasting; performance, service level performance; contractual, the various change order, contractual terms, contractual changes as we see, because it's data, right? It's spreading not only within the industry, it changes, it also goes across clients. relationship data, and then customer experience too as well. So on this one, Saurabh, how do you kind of see, how do they bring this all together? How do they get it? How do they capture it? What should they be doing? How do they basically tie this all out?
That is where our role comes in as benchmarkers and advisors.
Exactly.
Because when we are curating data, that's where the importance of how the siloed data has come in, and how do we benchmark with the service providers as well as with the clients, across these financial, your contractual levels, and especially the performance. Because financials, while everybody understands that it's more towards the value leakage, both from a customer perspective as well as the service provider perspective, the cost comparisons that we can draw through the data as well as the benchmarks. However, the important aspect is on the performance side. While everybody says that we've got the service levels that we are adhering to, and what are the benchmarks around that, but the key factor there is the source of that data. Where is that coming from? Is it from one tool, or is it an integration of data sources which are there? Then comes the factor of how are they calculating that performance SLAs on the performance targets. So all in all, these are the main things which are actually laying down the importance of data from there. And then important aspects of treating this from a contractual perspective, not just binding, for example, having a benchmarking clause within your overall package, as well as rebaselining every year with the client and the service provider. So these are some best practices that the service providers, what we also recommend as benchmarkers, as advisors to the clients as well as the service providers to actually go through that.
Henry, Ruth, any comments?
Yeah, we have a client right now. I mean, you talk about contractual data, just even keeping copies of the core date, the core contract, every change order, every amendment in one simple place so that you can actually recover it and restore it is huge when it comes time for renewals. Because half the time the clients don't know what somebody agreed to across the towers. So they're, and it's all in DocuSign, so it's not someplace anybody can actually gather it and see it. And then we end up having to run around to 15 different people to get copies of contract documents in order to be able to reconcile and even have an analysis of whatever is needed for the renegotiation. So to the extent that we have the ability, or y'all have the ability to keep solid records of those documents, I know it sounds like a simple thing, but we are seeing time and time again that people don't have easy access.
And it wasn't as critical before,
Right.
because you couldn't apply this Gen AI tool
to analyze it.
to really bring out the value in the analysis. Now clients are expecting, we need to have clean data. We need to have transparency across our environment. We need to pull that into one place so that we can do the analysis over it, and again, extract the value along with you all together, right? But it's a lot of it's your data, comes from your sources, so having that one single repository is key. And then if they can apply that across all your clients, imagine the value that you can get by analyzing across your entire client base.
Right.
So one of the things I'm hearing so much about right now is a concern with changing requirements around customer experience, AI, and everything else. How do you see the data associated with customer experience changing right now, or the new needs and the new requirements, and what can service providers do to actually help with that?
So it's huge. I mean, the example are call centers, right? The call center is the easiest place to really demonstrate the customer sat, the customer experience areas. Because when you get on a call with a person on the other end, what the really advanced organizations are doing, recording all those calls and then analyzing them for customer sentiment. So they can hear an angry tone, they can hear a query tone, they can hear a frustrated tone, and then being able to take that information and feed it back in a continuous loop, that continuous learning of how do I do better, how do I make better experiences, how do I reduce the effort to complete a transaction. It's going to be massive. It's out there, they call them XLAs, there's a whole body of research around experience level agreements and making sure that organizations are figuring out how to not focus as much on just operational transactions, but really focus on what the actual outcomes you're trying to achieve in that IT department.
And thank you, Ruth, for that call center experience, because we've all seen that watermelon effect, while everything outside is all green
That's right.
with the SLAs being met.
That's right.
But at the end of the day, at the core, the end user is not satisfied. Probably that the power of empathy is not there, which
right.
reflects in the tone or the discussions with the client. So yes, so that is some of the important inferences that can be drawn from the service provider side.
And it's been a challenge to shift to XLAs because the underlying foundation wasn't there.
Right.
The data wasn't there. The ability to analyze it at a low cost. Gen AI provides that ability at a low cost to analyze tons of data, right, in a real human fashion.
And it doesn't, you're not relying on somebody responding to a survey. How many of us actually respond to surveys?
Never.
0.
Yeah.
Right? So this gives you a chance. This gives you a chance to actually gather perception metrics without having to require somebody to fill out the survey. Because if you're filling out the survey, something didn't go right. You're not filling it out when things went
And the
great.
industry's been pushing, let's move off of these technical SLA business. Let's move to experience level. But I can tell you, very few
very hard.
the clients I've seen actually be successful because the tools weren't there.
We have
but
one
now,
that's on the precipice.
And how do you see that? How do you see that manifesting or being developed? Because obviously, as we've talked about earlier, in that in an incumbent situation, one-on-one situations, it's a lot easier to sit down and have those type of conversations than it is in the traditional old school RFP over the transom aspect. How do you see being able to shift from a very tactical, metric-driven service level more toward outcome-based and customer experience-based based service levels and drive that experience within the client?
So I think you introduce it long before the renewal discussion. I think it has to be something that you just present as part of your governance. By the way, we're starting to track this. This is what we're doing it for your value. You can circle back with these people if you need to, if there's a specific issue. But I think as you introduce these concepts and can demonstrate that you can see a trend, see a pattern, see an incident, remediate it, and get a better result next time, again, you're processing your renewal long before the termination of the contract.
Yeah, I mean, define the outcomes together with the client. Key back or attach back your service levels to those outcomes. And there's an interesting metric that I've been reading about is the time to value. How many of us actually track? We talk about transformations, technology, operation, but how many of us actually track? What has been the value delivered and what time with that particular transformation?
That's right.
So that is something which can actually bring about transparency and have a strategic partnership with the client rather than an operational one. So.
Yeah, we talked about the incumbent situation. If you've got a incumbent service provider within an environment, and if you've been within a client for 5 years, you have a lot of past data, right? You just may have not been farming it and harvesting it, and you can use that to generate that path forward. Would be what I would suggest. Any thoughts or any recommendations on how to actually look at that, other than just diving into it?
So I would take Kevin's 5 value drivers. Was it 5? I think it was 5. And I would align that data strategy to each of those to see where that alignment is. Then how do we take that data, extract the value, and achieve each of those? And they're all based on, as we were talking, incumbency, familiarity. All the panelists before us had similar concepts, relationship.
Yeah.
That's where the power is and taking it forward. Yeah.
How do you see? How do you see the importance and the timeliness and criticalness of data impacting the ability to not only extend a relationship, but actually expand a relationship deeper and broader within a client's organization, whether it's other towers within IT, whether it's other towers outside of IT in the BPO sector, or other type of strategy solutions? How do you see data, and how do you see the criticalness of the timeliness? Because we're in a world right now where everybody's expecting instant gratification. You don't want it 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. You want it 30 seconds after you request it. So, how do you see that? How do you see it applying? I'll throw that out to the group.
You will go first.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think the issue is to, again, get out ahead of it. I don't think you can build relationships without demonstrating value. I think that's part of what we do on a daily basis, and that might be by bringing new information. It might be by bringing in a partner. It might be by bringing in whatever. But I think the data has to be there. You have to make sure it's clean. You have to make sure it's consistent with all the other data they're seeing. I mean, there's a lot of mechanics to it. But I do think that the way to make that difference in value is to be proactive and to get out ahead of it. I don't know how to do it otherwise, and to build those relationships.
And I would come forward with that architecture,
Yeah.
right? Bring it forward and have the new roles in place.
Right.
Having a person on your team who's the value extractor or something of that
Right.
nature, right? That's typically not part of a typical client team, right? They're usually very operational focused, very account focused, even some sales focused, but not necessarily, working with the client to continuously extract value. And now that we have the tools, now that we know how to construct data, I think that's where it's going to come together. The people, process, technology, bringing that proactively to the client ahead of time, I think is a game changer.
Well, and piggybacking on something you said earlier, the expectation setting is the actual beginning of that process, right? You need to make sure that you're setting the expectations with your client. We're going to sit down, we're going to talk, we're expecting this out of this tower within X number of months or weeks or whatever, and then delivering on it. But that joint setting of expectations is going to be critical in order to make sure that you're not heading in a path that's just not valuable to them, even though you may think it is.
So we've got a couple of minutes left. I'd just like to I don't want to keep everybody from break to start out with, and get us back on schedule. But the other thing is to look at any additional comments that you guys might have. I mean, I see that we've talked about having the data. We've talked about having it in, access, but, common repositories, all in one place, multiple places. Because right now it seems like within most of my clients, it seems to be fragmented everywhere, and quite often it's not even within the client. They have to go back to the, partners, service providers, different business units to get it. How do you see this? How do you see getting to a common repository or, single point of truth for this?
I guess that is where our role comes in, to partner with the service providers, because we've got access through our 17 years of experience. We've got access to the data that we have, and we've curated it over time. So to help our service providers to actually go into the market with far more understanding of the client, as well as the vertical, as well as the support services that they are actually getting into, right? From not just from a pricing perspective, but even from the staffing, solutioning, what tools that they should be taking inside. So that is what the power of data that we can we've realized over years.
Ruth,
Yeah, and I probably said it multiple times, and I'll just summarize. I think it's having that overall multi-client vision architecture on, let's call it, value extraction foundation, right? And then apply that across your clients. So that's from the bottom up. How do we construct the data? How do we maintain it? How do we store it? How do we then work with our client with the right roles in place, right? And then also applying the new AI tools to get quick learning, quick responses, and quickly extract value, time to value. I think that's the overall theme on pitching today.
You want to close
Really
this out
last,
here, Ruth?
15 seconds.
Nah,
Really
you
last.
can go a few seconds over, but close this out.
So as Henry is talking and others are talking, it becomes really clear that one of the key things that you could do is make sure that you have clear connectivity and clear communication across your various projects. Because the time to value is because I can lift it from some other client and then apply it to here. Right? That's the trick, is to make sure that those people are talking. And I know from my implementation days, you're on a project, you're just heads down, right? You're not up and looking out. Somebody needs to be up and looking out on what's going on.
And the
in
cost
other
to do it has significantly reduced.
Oh, it's
right?
nothing, right? The collaboration tools that exist today that didn't exist, when I was programming, is dramatically different. So to the extent that you can build a layer where you're communicating across your own projects, I think that's going to help you with the time to value and innovation.
Well, if there's nothing else, I'd like to thank you guys. Great. I think it's a good panel.
It's
And
fun.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.